Well, according to the CDC, the number of overdose deaths in the state of Washington is rising faster than any other state, in large part because of the growing fentanyl crisis.
So this is 86 straight days. We have a definite emergency. We're losing 10 people a week to overdose. And at this point, we have the highest death rate in America. I retired in 2020 and took some time off, but this issue has been increasing on our radar here in Spokane as we go along. And for me,
I have a big family, and many of them, including some of my kids, have been directly affected by addiction.
I think everybody in Spokane more and more is having direct and personal experiences with it, and it's something we feel every day in our family and feel very strongly about as a dad. I think Spokane, downtown Spokane, it kind of captures it in a more intense way, but it's a community problem. And of course, our downtown is the seat of all of our culture and a lot of our commerce, the majority of our commerce. So it's a natural place to capture a sense of what's happening. I think what's surprising me at this point more than anything is when you see it each day and it's just here in plain sight, is that we're not, as a city, really treating this as an absolute emergency. It's not an emergency, like the Gray Fire at Medical Lake. That's an emergency we know how to deal with. The ice storm back in the 90s. That's an emergency we know how to respond to, natural disasters in general. This emergency, I think, is capturing the system off guard. They don't quite know how to respond to it. Just nationally, if you take 2 years of overdose deaths, it's higher than the combined deaths in Vietnam, the Iraq wars, and the Afghanistan war combined.
While Spokane's overdose death rate has no end in sight, we also continue to have one of the highest homelessness rates in America.
We're losing 10 people a week in Spokane, and the rest of the country is going down, and Spokane's continues to climb. We heard from Sheriff Knowles that it's going up 40% this year as the rest of the country is declining. It's a product, of modern technology. One thing is the price has dropped about 97% over the last 4 years. So when it was $25, $30 a pill, for instance, just 4 years ago, now it's down to $1 a pill. It's becoming stronger every day. There's a new derivation of fentanyl that's called carfentanil, and it's 100 times more powerful than fentanyl. And I think the only reason we're not seeing it is, enforcement surmises, DEA surmises that the cartels don't want to actually kill too many of their customers. There's a real, perhaps, and maybe this explains why we're not treating it like an emergency in Spokane. The war on drugs treated addiction as a crime, and the people engaged in it as criminals, and they locked them up at a really high rate. So you ended up with millions of people in jail, in custody, for addiction, basically. We were talking about STARS, and when they drop people off for a voluntary sobering bed with medication-assisted treatment, the question is, if it's voluntary, you don't have to stay there. At the interaction at the front end, it might be a police officer saying, hey, you're obstructing, or hey, you're doing open use. Do you want to go to jail, or would you like to go to a voluntary sobering bed? 100% of people say the voluntary sobering bed. It's surprising how many people want that treatment. And we actually, yesterday, we went around and asked people, primarily around the Brown Street Viaduct, if there was a voluntary sobering bed available with medication-assisted treatment, and you had a place for your belongings and a place for your pets if you have them, would you right now, this moment, be willing, voluntarily to go to that sobering bed? And we posed that question to 24 people and had extended conversation to kind of assure them that we weren't looking for a particular answer. 22 out of those 24 people said we would go right now. There is no safe, effective option in how we deal with this. The only option is to have an emergency response. And I also believe it's not just a local one. We need the state declaration to go with it. And so it's one of those things that draws all hands by definition. Everybody has to step up on an emergency level to deal with this. And, we have a lot of things pushing us in that direction. Gabriel's Challenge is something where we're creating an awareness, where we're, creating an interaction with our community that creates understanding to the point where we know what we have to do to deal with this. It's a rare moment where business, I think, and whether it's business or on a personal level, we're all uniting around this, knowing that the response here is a humanitarian response. That, when you treat this addiction problem as a mental illness, as a disease, and not a criminal justice problem, then you actually are bringing criminal justice into it to help people get into the services they need. You're not using the incarceration system. So is business being dramatically affected by this? Absolutely. We already have COVID, post-COVID, where we have a 30% vacancy, one of the highest in the country, and that alone would be overwhelming for business to deal with. But we also have this, street level crisis, which is dramatically affecting commerce. I don't think anybody could experience this and not feel overwhelming amounts of empathy and, just the tragedy and sadness of it.
Join me next time on 5 a.m. Walks as I travel the streets of downtown Spokane with Sheriff John Knowles, his wife Shauna, and daughter Sarah, as she shares her incredible story of addiction and recovery, just as her dad took the reins as sheriff of Spokane County.
On the mental side of it, it's just your brain telling you to go back.
Don't miss his personal story at the intersection of behavioral health, law enforcement, and family. Coming soon to 5amwalks.org.